Yes.
Very good evening. A very good evening to everyone present here. I'm pleased to welcome you all to our faculty development program, Out-Based Education. It gives me an immense pleasure to welcome our respected principal, Dr. Anita Rajendran, our dean, Dr. R. Revati, and our distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Sonal Sisodiya. A Sophia College alumnus, Dr. Sisodiya is an MBA gold medalist and has a PhD in management from Ajmer University. She also holds a PGD HRM from IGNOU, New Delhi. Her specialization is marketing and has over 20 years of experience in mentoring graduate and postgraduate students, engaging in quality research, conducting and handling MDPS and consultancy assignments. She is also a research guide at DAVV Indoor, which is a state university. She is a PCM trainer of American Management Association as well as a trainer for the Smart Girl program. She has a prolific research experience and has won over a dozen awards in research, including Manubhai Saha Memorial Research, a gold medal at Indian Commerce Association at Puducherry, Best Research Award at ISTD Bhubaneswar, Best PhD Thesis Award, Best Research Paper in 3 Annual Global Leadership Summit at Amity Business School, Noida, and Best Case Study Award by Emerald Publication. She has 90 paper presentations to her credit and various publications in national and international journals, including Scopus. Her case studies have been awarded at international platforms. She has been the keynote speaker, resource person, and external examiner at several FGPs, training programs, and institutions across the country. She also have the Best Teacher Awards accorded to her on several occasions. She has been instrumental in designing, advancing, delivering, and ensuring the best possible student experience through innovative creations of cerebral and intramural opportunities. We are also honored to have her as our guest speaker for the evening. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to welcome her today. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So thank you, Guna Shekhar ma'am, for that wonderful.
Sorry, ma'am. Yeah, I forgot to change my name. I'm
Yes,
Dr.
I was
Shanta
wondering. Okay, Dr. Shalu. So that is what I was looking at the name, and I was not too sure. So I thought
I
better
have
I
joined in a
Yes, so thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I would specially want to thank Smiley ma'am because she was the one who actually coaxed me into doing this program here. And I would like to share one thing about her. She is so enthusiastic and she was so keen on getting me on board that I had to say a yes. Even though I have never met her, never talked to her earlier, but the way she was so, you could say she coaxed me into this. So thank you so much to Smiley. And very good evening to the principal of Sri Krishna Swami College of Women, IQAC coordinator, director, dean, whatever you call the name there, because IQAC these days has become, the focal point for the colleges, because that is what will put your quality into perspective. So that is when we talk about outcome-based education. And if you may permit me, I would quickly want to jump on to the presentation where we could do the other talking as well. So I would like to present and my PPT. So give me a second. Yes. Is the screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, fine. Wonderful. So, a good evening to all the academicians present there. It's a virtual world, but we teachers have become so used to it that if not the students, at least we academicians are always ready for this online mode of learning also. So, on that note, I would like to take you to the first particular slide. This is by Alvin Toffler, who says that the illiterate of 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. When Toffler said this, he must have not been able to relate how much relevant it is for us today. For years together, we have practiced the Gurukul kind of education system where the teacher was supposed to give education or knowledge to the students and test according to his or her own perspective. But now we are talking about a different perspective. If I may ask you, in the classrooms, most of us stick to the lecture method of teaching, isn't it? A yes or no, probably, would help me.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And why are we so fond of this lecture method? Why are we so fond of this lecture method? Because why are we so fond of this lecture method? Because we've read so much, we have years of experience. So what we want to do is whatever I have learned over 1 decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, or maybe even 4 decades for some of us, I want to pour it on to my students. And that is what I feel is the most engaging learning experience for my students. However, there comes a catch. What is the catch? If we talk about the engaging learning experiences and when we consider on one side the emotional engagement of a student vis-a-vis whether it is passive or active, we find that unfortunately the lecture method is at the bottom. That means it is the most passive way of teaching the students. If it is not lecture, then what is it that makes it engaging learning experience for us? So they say that question and answers, case studies, facilitated discussions, problem solving, debates, games, and real projects are what are going to make the learner more engaged, are going to make the learner's experience better and more enriching. If we have to leave this habit of regular lecturing and move on to the real life learning or teaching him what the industry demands, we have to talk about outcome-based education. When we talk about outcome-based education, I also understand for the past 2 days you have had deliberations by very noted speakers. Smiley ma'am was sharing that with me. So I'm sure you have a pretty good idea about it. But still, as a context, I would want to discuss a little more about the OBE. When we talk about outcome-based education, it is an approach. It is an approach wherein what are we trying to do? We are trying to do it backwards. I'm trying to identify the desired outcomes out of my classroom teaching. And therefore, I have to understand what strategies and pedagogy I have to use if I have to achieve those outcomes. And third, most importantly, is how do I assess? Is a pen and paper examination sufficient or adequate to test a learner's aptitude? Maybe not. So when we talk about OBE, assessment also forms an integral part. So OBE is an approach wherein we are trying to attain the intended learning outcomes. We are trying to see if the students are able to develop the behavior which is going to be helpful in that particular discipline that they have chosen. And yes, like I mentioned, the assessment, whether that assessment is happening holistically within the context of their learning or not. So when we are talking about OBE, we are saying that this educational system has to be something wherein the student is successful at the end of their learning experience. Now, here we are only and only talking about the student-centric. A teacher may be highly learned, but in outcome-based education, who has to become learned? It is the student who has to become learner. So when we say what is it that we want our students to learn, what is going to be the outcomes, we also have to understand why should they learn it? What is going to be the motivation for them to learn that particular outcome? You know, as a teacher, I cannot force a student to do something that he or she is not interested in doing. In an outcome-based education, I have to provide him enough motivation to do it. For that motivation, it is also important what kind of pedagogy I am adopting. So the teaching strategies are very, very important. And at the end of the day, I have to assess the student in such a manner that I am in a position, or I can be able to tell whether the student has learned what was intended to learn or not. So outcomes are those clear learning results that the learners should be demonstrating at the end of any particular learning experience. Since these are the introductory slides, I'm going a little fast here because I want to spend more time on when we are talking about making these outcomes, framing these outcomes. Now, you know, in a classroom setup, maybe there could be these possible outcomes. What are these possible outcomes? Maybe I want that the knowledge levels should be increased. Maybe the skill development take place. Maybe when I talk about the behavioral aspects of the students, I want that after my sessions or after my course is completed, it should be positively influencing their attitudes. Maybe my outcome is to develop value system in them. Particular values should be assimilated into their characters. And sometimes they should be in a position to make a possible or a proper judgment once they have studied a particular course. For example, if my objective is to provide participants with a good understanding of outcome-based education, what should my outcome be? My outcome must be that participants should be able to demonstrate their grasp of OBE. That is, they should be able to write the learning outcomes for the courses that they teach. Now, this is something we are doing. When we do the mapping, your first session I was told was on mapping. You had to frame your course objectives, the program objectives, and also the PEOs and other things like this. So what is it that we did? We demonstrated whether we understood or we did not understand. If we are able to write the learning outcomes for the courses we are teaching, the purpose is served. Similarly, if I talk about OBE's approach, there are two approaches that outcome-based education takes. One is a traditional approach and the other is a transformational approach. A traditional approach is a basic approach where what am I wanting to do? I want that my student should be a master of some traditional subject related academic outcomes. Look, at the end of the day, there are certain things when we talk about, especially the science subjects, they have to be thorough with certain formulas, with certain academic outcomes. That is one part of OBE. But as I move up the ladder, I have to focus more on the transformational approach of OBE, which emphasizes a long-term, a cross-curricular outcome. If we talk about the new education policy, this is what we are trying to adopt. We are giving more chances, we are giving more options to the students. We are saying that a student who's chosen science can also study a subject from arts or liberal studies or any other particular area that he or she might be interested in. So, what is important is that if it has to be transformational in an approach, I have to understand whether what I am teaching is related directly to students' future life roles or not. So, what are we talking about? We are saying that in OBE, we are moving from subject specific outcomes to the long term cross curricular outcomes. This is what is outcome based education. A little more on this. From the traditional learning, we are moving to the problem based learning. What was traditional learning? Traditional learning said or told us what we need to know, what we need to know. Then there was a lot of rote learning. We had to memorize it. We had to keep memorizing it. And then the problems that were assigned were used to illustrate how to use that thing. So if somebody had memorized something very well, he or she got full marks there. But if I'm talking about a problem-based learning, then I am assigning the problem first. And then I want my student to identify what he or she needs to know if he or she has to solve this particular problem. And then he has to know what is to be applied in order to solve that particular problem. So, what is happening from a teacher centric approach? I am moving to a student centric approach. Taking a few examples here, you know, if I talk about the conventional education, what type of attributes were considered to be good in a learner? That he should be passive. He should be just sitting there and trying to grasp all what the teacher is teaching. Emphasis was on rote learning. And yes, whenever he came to us asking for important questions, we used to tell him or her that they should be consulting last 5 years question papers, because this is what we had done. In outcome based education, I'm saying that what is the outcome? What is the outcome? If I'm studying the past 5 year papers, what purpose it is serving? Is it preparing me for the future life roles or not? Similarly, when I talked about the instructional planning process, I was focusing on cognitive domain. What was the cognitive domain? Only understanding rote things. But when I'm moving to outcome based education, we are talking about all the three components: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. In my slides further, I'm going to explain these three aspects because these are very, very important. When I talk about the curriculum, then we saw that in conventional education, we had to adhere to a rigid curriculum. But in outcome-based education, I'm trying to see what are the course outcomes and how can I facilitate the student to learn those outcomes. Assessment method, as I always pinpoint that this is one of the most important thing if outcome-based education has to serve its purpose, is that assessment means what type of assessment is needed if I have to attain a particular course objective. Is a quiz sufficient? Is a pen and paper exam sufficient? Is a practical or a viva voce important there, or a project is needed? So one shirt or one size doesn't fit all, one shoe doesn't fit all. In the same perspective, an outcome-based education talks about different assessment tools for different types of courses. And the orientation, if I'm talking about, then if I have to enhance the active learning experience, I have to talk about the assessment tasks using different rubrics. So, an OBE framework moves in this direction. Firstly is the education. What is the student or what the student should be able to do. Then comes the curriculum. How to make the student achieve the outcome? This curriculum has to be designed by us. Thirdly, OBLT, which talks about learning and teaching. So, how to measure what the student has achieved? And for that, we are going to use what is OBA, that is outcome based assessment. Talking about this a little more, this is how the structure of OBE looks like. It starts from a vision and mission, moves on to the program education objectives, then your program outcomes, which lead to the course outcomes, which could be multiple in number. And a very, very important thing, which is a graduate attribute. Can any one of you tell me, if you could just unmute yourself, and if any one of you could tell me what is a graduate attribute? Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Yeah. So if any one of you in Google Meet, there's one issue that side by side you cannot look at what people are writing. So I'm just requesting if any one of you can just tell me what are graduate attributes.
Uh, the knowledge or professionalism that is required, in-depth knowledge about their subject.
Are we talking only about the knowledge? That is one aspect, yes.
No, even the skills also.
Exactly, exactly. Graduate attributes are something that the industry is looking for. If we want our students to become future ready, we have to consider what are the graduate attributes that are most sought after by the employers of today, or by maybe if the person wants to pursue the higher studies, then what are the set of courses he's already done which could be useful when he or she pursues the higher education also. So, whatever are our program outcomes, you have to consider the graduate attributes also. If I talk about the vision and mission, every organization, every college has its set of vision and mission. Vision, of course, is long term. I do not emphasize a lot upon vision because in a vision, you will always see that the institution aspires to be the best. What is important or more important is going to be the mission, because mission defines the purpose and identity of an organization, its core values, its reason for being there. You know, why is it that we are doing this? So, as an organization, if we have a set of shared values, please pay attention when I say a set of shared values. When we have set of shared values, we all think in the same direction. When we all think in the same direction, our purpose is defined. We all are one as a unit. And that is when we are in a position to create something which is going to be very, very relevant for the student. So the vision and mission should be something which can be translated into indicators, rather than an abstract mission or an abstract vision. Let us give it a more quantitative term. For example, if my indicator is employability, my mission statement or my vision statement should mention that I'm looking at making my students more employable. Sometimes maybe I use some other matrices, like the schools these days. Once the 12th class results are declared, these days the kind of percentages the students get, in our times, two of us together used to get something like that, right? So today what is happening is the matrices have changed. So we talk about, there used to be one point of time where people used to say that all the students in our college or in our class or in our school pass with good marks. Now we say everybody at least secured a first division. These days, people are saying in schools that everybody should have at least 75% and above. So, what is it? We have to talk about some indicators, some matrices, some kind of targets in our mission and vision statement. So, I urge you people that you should also look upon your vision and mission statement and try to see how it can get a more employable or a more indicative kind of a virtue. So, apart from the vision and mission, I was talking about the graduate attributes. If I talk about the graduate attributes, we are saying graduates should have those skills which can help them in number one, working independently. If you've taught them, now, if you've taught a medical student, that student should be in a position to perform a surgery all by himself or herself, isn't it? That is what my motto or my main aim should be. So, he or she should be able to work independently. Secondly, if needed, they should also be in a position to work collaboratively and respect diverse viewpoints. When you work in an organization, there's going to be a marketing department, there's going to be a finance department, an HR department, production department, maybe an IT department, so on and so forth. So, my graduate should also be able to understand what is it to work in collaboration with others so that the company achieves newer heights. Thirdly, if there are any new challenges that come up, he or she should be in a position to think critically about those. Fourthly, if there's any problem, he or she should be in a position to solve those problems. At the end of the day, if you're not innovative in your thinking process, if you do not have an out-of-box thinking, you'll never be able to come up or come out with something which is going to become the future of the industry or a particular society. So you have to tell your students that they have to learn to think independently, also in collaboration, and also innovatively. At the end of the day, it is very important to have very good communication skills. Your graduate must be knowing a lot of things, but until and unless he or she is able to communicate effectively, till then his idea cannot sell in the market. So a graduate attribute also is good communication skills. And yes, you have to be persistent in your efforts. You cannot dream of overnight success. You know, what happens sometimes in the movies. So that might not be a reality. So you have to teach your graduate. When I say graduate, I'm not just saying that we are only talking about the undergraduates or something like this. We are also talking about anybody who's studying. So these could be the undergraduates or the post graduations. But the term that we use is called as a graduate attribute. So the graduates have to be prepared for all this and more. Is someone else presenting the screen? I got a notice there. Or is it visible?
Yes, ma'am, now it is visible.
It is visible, right, because there was a notification there. Right. Now, when I talk about the graduate attributes and the vision and mission, then I talk about my program educational objectives, which are known as the PEOs. Now, PEOs are always going to be the broad statements which will describe the career and professional accomplishment that your program is preparing the graduates to achieve. So, an engineering graduate would be learning something different than a medical student. If you want that your student has to have a strong base in mathematics, science, and engineering, then you need that the person should be able to solve the electronics and telecommunication problems. So what are we doing? We are trying to upskill We are trying to upskill the students. When I'm talking about upskilling, I'm also talking about comprehension, analysis, designing, and creating. I'll be talking a little more on these four aspects when I talk a little about the Bloom's taxonomy. So here, I want you to understand that what are program educational objectives? These are essentially going to be the broad statements which describe a particular career or a professional accomplishment that your program aims at achieving. These program educational objectives should always have three type of objectives: cognitive objectives, affective objectives, and behavioral objectives. When I talk about cognitive objectives, because it is related to the mind, I want to say that what is it that I want my graduates to know? Number one. Then comes the affective objectives, which is very important. What is it that you want your graduates to think or care about? In any profession, it is also important that they develop empathy. They become affective in nature also. And the third is the behavioral objectives. What do you want your graduates to be able to do? What is it that after studying your particular course, they will be able to do? They will be able to perform. So, affective, cognitive, and behavioral. These three elements are important when I'm talking about the program educational objectives, the PEOs. After PEOs comes the program outcomes. I know that you've studied all this, but I want to go in a sync, so I'm just taking you through all these. Program outcomes naturally, because we are moving down the funnel now. So these are going to be narrower statements. They will relate more to the knowledge, skills, and behavior of students as they progress through their graduation program and once they are through with their graduation program. For program outcomes, always remembers that your POs should align with and should reflect all the graduate attributes. And when I talk about the graduate attributes, as we mentioned earlier, we are talking about those competencies which the graduate of a program should possess. So, you have studied this. I saw in the link that was provided to me that how you come up with the program outcomes, how you make your learning outcomes. So it has to have an action word, a learning statement, and a broad statement of the acceptable performance that you expect from the student. This program objective, for example, I'll just give you an example, say from fine arts. My broad perspective is students should be able to demonstrate knowledge of the history, literature, and function of the theatre, including works from various periods and culture. But if I want it to be more specific, then what will I say? I will tell them that students should be able to explain the theoretical basis of various dramatic genres and illustrate them with examples from plays of different eras. This is a little more specific. If I want them to be more specific, I'll specify the conditions also. So what would I say? I would ask them, during the senior dramatic literature course, the students will be able to explain the theoretical basis of various dramatic genres and illustrate them with examples from plays of different eras. Does this look more specific? Yes, it does. Similarly, if it's philosophy or a business, I have to tell them, like in business, my broad perspective is students will understand how to use technology effectively. But if I want it to be more specific, I will want that each student be able to use word processing, spreadsheets, databases, and presentation graphics in preparing their final research project and report. So what have I been able to do? I've been able to use some matrices. These matrices are quantitative in nature, as I mentioned earlier, and therefore the assessment becomes easier because I have parameters to judge these people or to judge not the people, I'm sorry for using that term here, to judge the kind of outcome I'm expecting from these people. Then comes the course outcomes. Course outcomes, as we know, these are very, very specific to a particular course. So for example, in marketing management, my first course objective or my first course outcome could be understand the role and functions of marketing within a range of organizations. Then I want that my students should be able to capture the market insights regarding target audience. So I talk about STP, consumer behavior, wherein I'm talking about the different behavior of the consumers given the different types of products or services they are buying, and the 4 P's of marketing. And thirdly, my course objective is also to gain a better understanding of the digital marketing. So see, what have I been able to do? If we look at this diagram, this is what I have been able to do. My PEOs are there. These PEOs can be direct and indirect. From that emerges my program outcomes. These also can be direct and indirect. Indirect, when I say, I'm talking about, like, you can understand when you have an exit survey. This should be a part. The IQAC can make a note of it, that whenever the students will pass out, you should always do an alumni survey and maybe even an employer survey. By way of these two things, you understand that was the alumni getting what you wanted him or her to learn? And secondly, when these alumni or when your students ultimately are placed in the market, what is the employer's perception about the graduate attributes of these graduates? And these program outcomes then should be broken down into the course outcomes, which can again be the direct ones, the theory practical things that we usually talk about, or the indirect ones, wherein we are also talking to the faculty whether your student has been able to achieve the course objectives or not. So this way, all these things are linked in one. And when I'm talking about performance assessment, I'm saying that you should be able to assess the higher level cognitive skills rather than just the discrete skills, which are just very superficial, that a true false kind of a thing that might serve some purpose, but it might not be a holistic method of assessment of your student. So I have to understand that until and unless my students are good with their skills, that is what is the direct measure, that if they are able to get a hold onto the skills which are needed by their employers, that is when that assessment is complete. So, like if I talk about the learning outcomes and the assessment, for example, my learning outcome says that at the end of the course, students should be able to decide which statistical tool can be used for a specific hypothesis. After that, how I should be in a position to encode that particular data may be acceptable in an SPSS software, and how do I use that SPSS to compute for the inferential statistics. Now, as we all know, SPSS is a tool, but it is up to me how to use that particular tool. If I'm using the results from that SPSS, then I should be able to infer it also. That is when we say that the human mind is better than the artificial intelligence, because it can create a model for you, but who's going to interpret it? You. So that has to be a learning outcome. When I talk about the indicators, maybe, what I have to know is that whether I'm using the SPSS to encode a particular thing, I'm able to use that. What type of test should be used? That should be the indicator. So these are quantitative indicators again. And what is the assessment? I'll give them a test that, given a hypothesis, write the correct statistics to be used. Performance-based assessment could be when the students are able to encode the data from a survey to the SPSS worksheet, when they are able to do that. And thirdly, I should have a checklist ready so that I can check whether step by step they have been able to do what was expected of them or not. This is why we say that low skilled jobs are paid lowly, wherein the high skilled jobs are paid whatever, there's no limit to it. We have all our software engineers who are minting money just because their higher order skills are correct and they know which skill to be used when, so that the company gains at the end of the day. So again and again, I'm saying that we have to be more student centric. So from a teacher centered approach, I'm moving to a student centered approach. In a teacher centered approach, the course objective was the learning target. Marketing management, he should know what is marketing. There was no mapping. The student independent learning was not calculated. If he or she asked us a question, we used to say, very nice, but don't disturb me while I'm teaching this. You should learn what I am teaching. Keep your knowledge to yourself. And when I'm saying the contact hours used to reflect the credit value. So if Hindi and English, the credits were 20 credits only. So that means we said that, okay, this is lower. If another subject had 40, so that means the number of hours I'm devoting, that used to dominate, or that used to demonstrate how important a particular subject is, right? And sometimes we also used to tell students, I am not being offensive, but yes, we do this sometimes unintentionally. Also, we tell students that this is a practical subject. If you do not study this, you will fail. That's a theory subject. It's okay. Even if you do not study very much, it's easy to pass. What am I doing? I am focusing upon maybe the kind of questions I'm asking in a particular subject, because if it is practical, it's tough. If it is theory, it has no meaning. In a student-centered approach, my learning outcomes are most important. Mapping is very, very important. Thirdly, the student independent learning time is also calculated. So these days, if a student chooses not to study from you, but to study from any of these NPTEL and other thing of the government initiatives, then too you have to give him the due credit or the due recognition. And the total self-learning time these days should reflect the credit value. So how much time the student is spending is also of great importance, right? So if I'm talking about a quality improvement, if you have some people who have been a part of the quality circles or who have studied operations and who loved to study this, I'm sure that they do understand what is a PDCA cycle, a plan, do, check, act cycle. That is also important for us when it comes to the outcome-based education, that I have to understand what are my outcomes. These outcomes, as we studied earlier, we are talking about the vision, mission, the course outcomes, and the program outcomes in our outcome thing. Secondly, I am then devising the teaching learning systems. That means what are the resources, what are the facilities I'm offering, what are the learning activities I'm offering, and what is the teaching method or what is the teaching pedagogy that I am using. Then I check through again the assessment and evaluation. So this assessment has to be done of institution, of program, and of course. So this is what is happening. Like NBA. NBA is not for the institute, but NBA is for the course or the program, that way. And if there is something missing, I have to act. When I talk about improvements, it sounds a little demeaning, but it is important. In improvements, I have to keep updating and I have to keep enhancing. So this is what is the continuous quality improvement that I am talking about. So again, we come back to the same question that we started our discussion with. Why is it important to know the outcomes prior to planning and teaching? So why is it important? so that I have a clear picture of what is important for my student. I'm busy teaching for 3 years, and then I realize that the skills I imparted my student is no more relevant in today's field. So I have to understand the curriculum, the instruction, that is how I teach, and the assessment to see that whatever I'm teaching the particular student ultimately is happening. And for this, I would want that we take a step, or we move up the taxonomy, which is also called as the Bloom's taxonomy. When we are talking about the Bloom's taxonomy, we are essentially talking about a person who gave this Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives. This Bloom's taxonomy also has its own share of criticism. But what I really like about Bloom's taxonomy is that they made the educational objectives more measurable. So, what did it say? It said that the level 1 of anything is remembering. That means if I am teaching a particular course, remembering is at the bottom, the rote learning. Second is understanding. Understanding means the student is able to classify things, is able to discuss a little more, explain, identify, report, and sometimes summarize also. Moving up the ladder, third level is applying. When I'm talking about applying, I'm saying that how a student can take their knowledge and understanding to different situations. Whether he's able to apply, calculate, demonstrate a particular thing, interpret, show, solve, or even suggest. Once the application part is over, then we talk about analyzing. If my student is able to draw connections between ideas, is he able to think critically? Is he able to break down information into the sum of its parts? So, to analyze, to compare, to contrast, to distinguish, to explore, to investigate, etc. Level 5 talks about evaluating. When the student can make accurate assessment or judgment about different concepts, students can make inferences, solutions. So he's able to argue, he's able to assess, he's able to be a critic, he's able to defend his own point, he's able to judge and also justify. And then you move to the level 6, the highest level, which is the ultimate aim of students' learning journey. At this final level of Bloom's taxonomy, the student can demonstrate what they have learned by creating something new. That means I'm able to compose something new. I'm able to create, I'm able to devise a law, generate another formula or way of doing this particular thing. I'm able to organize, I'm able to plan, and I'm able to produce. For all these things to happen, this is how we are moving up the ladder. From simply remembering or recalling, I'm able to move up the ladder where I'm able to create something which is new, which is something of relevance to the people. So, if I'm talking about my learning goals, again, I talk about them. These are outcomes. These outcomes have to be clear. You know, they should be written in simple jargon free terms. For example, when I say work collaboratively with others, this is a clear learning goal. These goals or these outcomes should be observable in nature. That means when I say identify and analyze the ethical issues in this particular discipline, you should be able to do this. They should focus more on skills, and they should be significant and aspirational. If your learning goals are not great, I'm sure none of the student would want to come back to you saying that, okay, we are interested in this. So, what I am maybe, fanatic about, what I am very eager and keen about, I have to share, or I want my enthusiasm to be contagious. Only then I would be in a position to pass it on to the other people also. Here is an example that I have taken where, if you look at this, this is a structure if it is outcome attained learning or not. We will follow the 1, 2, 3, 4 written here, and I'll explain you the points from 1 to 9. When I talk about the first point, we are talking about the POs, the program objectives that we have to achieve. For this program objectives, I have to design the courses. For these courses, I design the units. Now we know how to do it. These are more specific. So these COs, I have to map to the POs at a later point of time. So how do I do this? I do few things. One thing is I will be evaluating them, and these evaluations should be linked to some assessments. What can these assessments be? These assessments can be in form of assignments, normal assessments, group discussions, projects, quiz, depending upon what it is attaining at. Also, whatever question bank I am giving to my students, I have to see whether each of these questions is linked to my course outcomes or not. So, from fourth step, I move on to the fifth step. What is the fifth step? Whether I have been able to attain the outcome or not. Please remember who is the unit of measure in this case. The unit of measure in this case is the learner. So, whose results have to be seen here? The results of the learner. And what results are we expecting? Not what something I taught necessarily, but what is it that I expected him to learn after I taught him. So the results should again match the course outcomes, the program outcomes, and should give him some graduate attributes. These graduate attributes sometimes have to be compliant. If there is some kind of certification, like if you study maybe computers, or if you study some programs on your own, it is fine. But if you get a certification, then your employer will be more than happy to take you, to rope you in, because that certification is somewhere telling that your graduate is skilled in a particular thing. I'm sure most of us are on LinkedIn. When this time you open your LinkedIn account, when you access it, please go to the profile section, and after that take some skill tests. You would be, not pleasantly surprised, but some of us might not feel it nice. But when you take those skill tests, you will find that it is not very easy to clear those skill tests. Try doing that today. And maybe, you could let me know at a later point of time. You could just send me a mail also as to how many skill sets or how many skill tests were you able to clear and with what scores. That is what is compliance here. The graduate attributes, if it is authenticated by a certification, it will become, or it will make your graduate more employable. And yes, at any point of time, if you have to keep updating yourself, like we mentioned earlier also, you have to do it without any second thoughts, right? So this is how we move on. So if I want to rush through once again, what is the OBE implementation process according to me? Then I say that I have to first establish my mission statements and my PEOs. These should help me in doing what? In mapping my mission statement with my program education objectives. My PEOs cannot be in isolation. They have to be aligned to what my mission statement is. So these mission statements, or this mission statement, should be such that it helps you in achieving your program educational objectives and vice versa. Thirdly, whatever your program learning outcomes are, try to see if Bloom's taxonomy can help you in framing that particular thing. Then, my program educational objectives should also be mapped with my program learning objectives. Educational objectives, the POs, should also align with the LOs. So any efficient OBE means you should have a set of threshold values that until and unless you achieve that level, that particular thing is not done. That checklist is still incomplete. So I have to understand what is mapping learning outcomes. It's nothing but I have to align the course level outcomes with my program outcomes. So a faculty anytime can explore the students' program level outcomes at the course level using this particular mapping method. And then I define the course objectives for each course. Any course cannot progress if it does not have an objective. So I have to see that the course objectives have been met during my course or my tenure of that particular course. These course objectives can be broader also, not a problem there, but they have to be more aspirational in nature. These course learning outcomes again should be considering the Bloom's taxonomy. There has to be a threshold for every course. This course outcome, when I'm talking about the mapping, should be in line with Bloom's taxonomy. And when I'm talking about mapping the course learning outcomes at appropriate levels, this means the LOs and PLO can never be ignored. Since you've studied all this, I'm sure you're able to relate it. What I'm trying to place my emphasis upon is whether you are also considering that the higher level of Bloom's taxonomy are put into place when you're designing your COs, POs, and PEOs also. Then comes the assessment. When we are talking about assessment, like I said, that assessment can be done in any form. There is a percentage form when we give it to the students. These days, we also talk about a CGPA. Sometimes it is just a pass or fail kind of a thing. So it depends whether you want to grade the students, whether you want to give a percentage to the students. But what is important is what type of assessment tools are we using so that it is meaningful in nature. Then I should also be able to map the topics with my course learning outcomes. Course outcomes, of course, are a little broader, but when I'm talking about the topics, we will also realize and we will also understand that the introductory part of every topic or every chapter or every unit has to be dealt differently. And when it comes to the teaching part, at the later part, when you're talking about maybe the classifications or the types or the factors affecting or the pros and the cons, then the pedagogy has to be different. See, when we are explaining maybe a diagram of a heart to the students, then they have to learn it that way only, because that is what is tried and tested. I'm not saying that is a rote learning. But what I'm trying to place emphasis upon is that the students need to understand that this is how the structure is going to be. But the moment I'm talking about the other things, then my pedagogy can change. I can talk about exceptions. The same happens in grammar. When we teach English grammar to the students, then there are certain rules. When we say that, okay, this is the rule of the thumb. But what is also important at the same time is the exceptions. So a teacher should pay emphasis upon the rules as well as exceptions. So much so that your student, your graduate, should be able to frame something out of what you have taught him or her. So the pedagogical tools for each course outcome delivery can also change. And then I'm sure some of us do this, but I hope all of us would start doing this. We should always have a course lesson planner. This lesson planner should not be done for the formality's sake. It is something which is the fabric, which constitutes the fabric of you as a teacher, that tells your integrity in the classroom, that tells how well you are in love with a particular subject and what is it that you want your student to learn out of that. So, when I'm mapping all the questions at the assessment level, I should ensure to frame questions which could be both the class assignments or the written assignment, like we say homework, but they should cover all the levels of taxonomy. They should test the knowledge, the comprehension, the application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. So we do not have to miss this out at any stage. Come up with rubrics. These rubrics should be able to measure the learning of the students. These are like matrices, more quantitative in nature. And then you have to measure the performance of the students after each assessment component and propose a remedial measure. Now, some students are better, maybe at the lower level of taxonomy. Some students who might not be very attentive in the class, who might not remember the definition, but is always better when it comes to giving or doing that thing. We have all watched that movie, Three Idiots. So, what the character that is played by Amir Khan, what is he good at? He is not good at rote learning. But whatever he is doing is actually the highest level of taxonomy. He is able to produce something which is new, which is more value addition in nature. And therefore, when I say assessment, we have to understand that each of the students, their performance has to be measured against a different threshold. If there are certain strengths, I have to work on that. If there are certain shortfalls, I also have to cater to that particular thing. And if needed, I have to bring about a change in my teaching learning process, in the course content, and sometimes even the topics of my course. So I have to measure the performance of the students against the threshold for each semester. And then finally, I will be able to attain the outcomes through direct and indirect assessments. So assessments, when I'm talking about, it could be both direct and indirect, like I mentioned. A paper pen test is also important, but what is also important is sometimes taking a survey from the students. So I have to understand which thing will suit my needs better. Then what I have to do is study how the last 3 years or 4 years we have been able to attain these particular things and propose remedial actions if it is needed. Assess the attainment of your PEOs between 3 to 5 years of graduation for every batch of students and propose suitable changes. Like I said, that your alumni, they are not just your alumni, they will also give you a very good feedback. So once they are placed, talk to them after 3 years, talk to them after 5 years, and try to see if the skill set requirement has changed in the market. If it has changed in the market, then I have to see that, okay, now it is time that I take up something remedial in nature. So this is how I have to see. I'll give you one last example here, which will help you in putting it in context. So I say, if students have learned maybe knowledge subject of the course, then they should be able to, there's a particular action that the students can do if they know the content by completing whatever assessment you have given them. For example, if students have learned US history since 1865, then they should be able to explain the effect of immigration on American culture by completing an essay which compares and contrasts the effect of two immigrant populations in American culture from the time period 1865 till 1900. 100. So what is the course level objective here is to explain the effect of immigration on American culture. So what is needed is that I should be in a position to come up with something which is called as critical thinking. As teachers, I have to incorporate critical thinking into my course. So I have to align my learning objectives, my activities that I do in the class, and the assessments which will help in understanding what my student has learned over a period of time. So the place to begin and most obvious space to embed critical thinking in a syllabus is with student learning objectives or outcomes. A well-designed course aligns everything else, all the activities, assignments, and assessments with those core learning outcomes, right? So this is what takes us maybe towards the last thing, which says that learning is not attained by chance. So Adams said learning is not attained by chance. It must be sought for with ardor and attended to with diligence. And as the teachers, as the faculty members, I'm sure all of us can do that. So thank you so much for your patient listening.
Thank you, ma'am. I now
If,
request the participants.
yes.
I now request the participants, in case if you have any queries, you can ask to the guest.
There are a lot of thank yous and very good sessions. So I thank you everybody for this patient hearing and listening. And if you just permit me to take 5 minutes of yours more, because I do not see many questions coming up. So what I was going through was that Amity, the Amity College, that university, they had put certain things related to their NAC survey and other things like this. And there was a very interesting thing. So I have incorporated those slides also in my PPT. If you permit me, I'll just show you that also. See, like for their curriculum, when they are rating this curriculum, just see what are the parameters they are using. They are using the parameters which say the curriculum is structured, comprehensive, relevant, and arranged properly. The curriculum is effective in enhancing teamwork. The curriculum is effective in developing analytical and problem-solving skills. The curriculum is effective in enhancing constructive learning. Curriculum is effective in developing ICT and communication skills, and curriculum has relevance to real-life situations, reflects current trends and practices in the respective disciplines. And on this basis, this is how they have rated. They have asked the students. So what they do is they ask the students, they ask the alumni, and they ask the faculty to rate the curriculum. So what is the average? You can say that 92.34% are satisfied, 7.6 people are not satisfied. And what are the parameters where they are gaining more and where they are gaining less? So, one very easy way of doing things is that I can just ask that student, okay, how is my curriculum? Tell me, good, bad, okay. The other way is like this. What have I given them? I have given them a lot of quantitative data. So if they are talking about whether the curriculum is effective in enhancing teamwork, when we are talking about the collaborative learning, so just see what are the kinds of points which are given here. See, not many people are happy saying that the collaborative point or the collaborative part is taken care by in curriculum. So that tells me that, okay, this point needs some kind of revision. Similarly, they've done a lot here. Like, for example, this. They've taken an alumni feedback. And what are the questions that they are talking about is, I'm sorry, yeah, like they had asked their students different questions like whether the classrooms are equipped with LCD projectors, whether the laboratories are properly maintained, do the labs possess all the necessary software, are the auditoriums well spaced, well equipped, well maintained, are the computer labs accessible as and when required. So the students have given these marks on institutional structures. So, this is one way of looking at things which can help you in understanding or deliberating upon things which need a further action. Right? So, these were few examples that were. If anybody has to ask anything, please feel free.
I think everyone are very much clear with the concepts, ma'am. Moving on to next session. Very good evening to all the participants here. No duty is more urgent than that of returning thanks. Now I take this opportunity to place on record my hearty thanks to our chief guest, Dr. Sonal Sisodiya, for sparing her valuable time to empower us through this outcome-based education, a student-centric approach. Thank you, ma'am, for taking us through POs, COs, Bloom's taxonomy, learning goals, and as how the resultants should match with the graduate attributes. We really enjoyed your session and grasped all the contents of the session. And I assure you that we would use all the concepts in our teaching learning practices. I would extend my sincere thanks to our enthusiastic participants for making this event a grand success. Once again, I thank one and all who have contributed for the successful happening of the event. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you so much. I can share my mail ID if you want in the chat box. So if anybody has any queries, you can please. So thank you very much once again.
Thank you, ma'am, for
And
being here
I
in spite of your busy
hope
schedule.
it was useful. And I have shared my mail ID. So because we are all academicians, I would want that we should all be collaborating. And if there's anything that we need to discuss more upon, I'm there. So thank you so much, Smiley ma'am. And thank you to the college administration as well. Thank you. Good day to all.